Okay, the live stream and the recording have started. Good morning, everyone. What a beautiful way to open my first meeting and to recognize Black Liberation Month with my colleagues and committee members. My name is Deputy Mayor Amber Morley, and I'm the new chair of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. The clerk has confirmed we do have quorum, so we will call meeting 5 to order of our Confronting Anti-Black Racism meeting. I'd like to start off by wishing everybody a happy Black History Month and by taking a moment to thank each and every one of you who have joined us here today. And especially thank you to Mosa and including the background joiner there. What a beautiful way to ground ourselves together with the sounds of life and liberation. So it's so beautiful. Um, Today is an important day that we come together during such a busy time to contribute to the ongoing work of disrupting anti-Black racism and discrimination embedded in our city institutions and agencies, and increasing equitable opportunities and access for Black communities and residents in our city. Your leadership inside and outside of City Hall is greatly appreciated, and we recognize that here at this table. I also want to acknowledge the community members who are streaming today's meeting live online at City Council's YouTube channel at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. It is a pleasure to chair and convene my first meeting. Thank you again to Mosa McNeely, who skillfully opened us with a drum call this morning. This year's theme is Decade After Decade, Building Our City Through Unity. This meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology. And thank you, everybody, for the grace in making this a virtual meeting. I think we all would rather not have fought the snow this morning. So thank you for that. Members are connected along with staff by video conference or by calling in. Because we're meeting remotely, we ask for your patience as with any delays or technical issues, this can happen in our hybrid world. I would also like to remind everybody who is joining the meeting remotely to keep your mics muted if you can and your videos turned on so we can see your beautiful faces. Unless you need to address the committee or the chair, it'll help with any background noise or echoing. Members, please keep your cameras on as I mentioned, mics muted unless you wish to speak to staff. And if you need to grab my attention, just wave and I'll absolutely call on you. When voting on an item or a motion, I would ask members to make sure your video is on and your hand is raised to indicate your vote. If there's a recorded vote, we will ask you directly, or the clerks, Gina, thank you, will ask in favor or opposed. Members, I'd like to remind you that although we are participating remotely, we must still submit our motions in writing. The clerk staff are available at cabrac@toronto.ca to help with motions. I will turn it over to our committee's vice chair, Lucina.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morley. So we are excited to launch our first meeting of 2025. My name is Lucina Rakatagao and I'm the Vice Chair. As we begin this meeting, we want to begin by honoring the land that we are on. So although we are in different locations, the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee acknowledges the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. I would like to reintroduce Mosa McNeely, who opened up our meeting today. Mosa is a community leader and sees her work as part of a tradition of Black women activists, artists, educators, and spiritual practitioners concerned with social justice, cultural reclamation, and freedom. Her interdisciplinary research brings visual art into conversation with performance and thinks through themes of Middle Passage memory, Black radical imagination, and the sacred. Over 35 years of practice, Mosa has developed a Black arts education pedagogy grounded in the principles of cultivating African cultural literacy, fostering Black agency, and nurturing Black self-love. She has brought her projects to hundreds of schools, reaching thousands of learners. The recipient of many awards, Mosa was one of the 100 accomplished Black Canadian women honorees of 2020. She holds a diploma from OCAD-U and a master's from York University. I will now turn it over to Mosa once more to open us up and recognize our ancestors.
Thank you so much. I'm going to begin with pouring libation, and then I'm going to play my drum and sing some songs. We are so grateful to be infused with the essence of spirit, to be sacred beings in human form, sharing this experience of life on earth with each other. We give thanks to the Most High, to Olodumare for presiding over the realm of the sacred, Ashe. To Eshu for opening the way today for this to be an auspicious gathering, Ashe. We make our devotions to the Orishas to let them know that we are awake and we are ready to commune with them, to surrender to their divine wisdom, and allow them to sanctify us and our work on the earth, on this earth, in this time. For this and so much more, we say, Ashe. We give thanks for Mama Yemaya, the spiritual entity who dwells in the ocean realms, the daughter of Olokun, known as the guardian of the deep unknown. May we be willing and able to receive her nurturing maternal care and energy so that all we do ushers from a place of love. For this and so much more, I say, Ashe. Mama Oshun, Orisha of the sweet waters, may we receive your energies of beauty, sensuality, and creativity so that we enrich, enliven, and inspire all those with whom we come in contact, all those we love, all those we hope to serve. Ashe. Mother Earth, Mama Late, Mama Asasaya, and the Abasum, the elemental ones, the earth, wind, fire, water, animal, plant, mineral, spirit, medicines, and totems of the earth. We give thanks for your lavish beauty and for your lush sustenance of all of life on this planet. Ashe. Ancestors, Nananom and Samanfo, Egungun, we call you by your names so that you know that we remember you and we honor you, so that you know that we are doing our utmost best to carry forth your legacy in our lifetimes. Ashe. So I welcome you all if you want to unmute, all those who are able to unmute, and call the names of your ancestors, and I will pour for you. As I hear names, I will pour and say Ashe.
Dr. James Tachani.
Ashe.
Melinda Newton.
Ashe. Lila Clark. Ashe.
Dorothy Moscow.
Ashe.
Anna Morley.
Ashe.
Louis March.
Ashe. Clement McNeely. Ashe.
Lisa Ravison.
Ashe. Auntie Titin. Ashe. Auntie Jen. Ashe. Auntie Yvonne. Ashe.
Charles Rowland.
Attack Commander. Pearl Haynes.
Ashe. Nelson Mandela. Ashe. Harriet Tubman. Ashe. Bell Hooks. When we call one, we call all. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe-o.
Thank you so much, Mosa. Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, thank you so much for bringing our ancestors and the importance of spirit and the divine and all of the things that connect us as individuals, as people, as Black people, as Indigenous people as well. Um, I am struck in this moment by a teaching of an elder, and I just want to share because I feel very much touched by your performance, but also the importance of the drum to connect us into our spirits, into our heart space. And Elder Kim Wheatley shared once that resonated deeply. The longest journey in the human life is the journey from the head to the heart. And it's about a feather's long, right? But we all spend a lot of time to get there. And our ancestors knew, and these beautiful vibrations that help our energy resonate deeper and embody, I think, spirit in a beautiful way. So I just want to say thank you from my heart. Mosa, I'm sure everybody, I hope everybody really enjoyed kicking us off in that great way. And as we do in this space, thank you, as we do in this space, fusing, teachings and ways of knowing and being with City Hall and process and procedure. So I am going to quickly call for confirmation of minutes before I offer some opening remarks and get us flowing through our meeting. So again, thank you, Musa, for blessing us this morning and for being with us as well. And thank you to the ancestors for being in this space and for guiding us always and walking with us on this journey. So with that, I'm just looking for a member to move a motion to confirm the minutes of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory from September 4th, 2024. Can I have somebody move that motion by show of hands? And sorry, I gotta readjust my screen here so I can see everybody. Thank you so much, Waleed. Can I have a seconder? Awesome, Lucina, thank you. And all in favor, just by show of hands. Thank you so much. That is carried. So again, what a time. What a time we are in. We've seen such incredible progress and increasing representation and opportunities for Black Torontonians specifically. This committee is a demonstration of that progress and is a build on a legacy of community and municipal leadership. The City of Toronto was the first municipality in Canada to proclaim Black History Month with activism and engagement by Black Torontonians and organizations such as the Ontario Black History Society. The city was also first to proudly proclaim Emancipation Month in 2019 to honor and observe the formal and legal abolishment of slavery in the British colonies in 1834. In that same year of 2019, the City of Toronto also officially recognized the first United Nations Decade for People of African Descent, which the UN first declared in 2013, spanning from 2015 to 2024. The decade calls for the embodiment of its themes of justice and recognition. One of the key priorities of this committee is advising City Council on the implementation of the principles of the decade to ensure positive outcomes for Black Torontonians in areas of child welfare, housing, healthcare, employment, and entrepreneurship, as well as education and overall promoting equitable outcomes for Black Torontonians. We know we still have a lot of work to go. A major step in advancing recognition of the decade was through a motion put forward by the committee's former chair, my predecessor, Councillor Chris Moyes, and seconded by Mayor Chow. That involved renaming of city assets and the curating of a public education campaign on the impact and resilience born out of the transatlantic slave trade. The campaign features transit shelter ads with beautiful Afrofuturism art by Kanisha Debreo, a curated book list in partnership with Toronto Public Library. We've also partnered with the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement and local Black artists to support a school initiative that works with students to reimagine the legacy of womanist and activist Mary Ann Shad Carey. Our work is buttressed as the United Nations recently declared a second international decade for people of African descent, which starts this year and will culminate in 2034. Woo, Lord, so I think that far ahead. We are honored to continue this legacy of advancing recognition, justice, and development, and are encouraged that the city is advancing this work with all of your leadership at the table, and of course, with the renewal of the proclaiming of the decade. On behalf of Mayor Chow, I'm honored to share, and we're not there in person, but there'll be a printed copy up at City Hall as well. Happy to share this proclamation. Whereas on December 17th, 2024, the United Nations General Assembly proclaimed 2025 to 2034 the second international decade for people of African descent, continuing under the theme of people of African descent, recognition, justice, and development, promoting protection of the rights of people of African descent. The Government of Canada co-sponsored this proposal aimed at building on the efforts put forth during the first International Year for People of African Descent back in 2011. It includes raising visibility of people of African descent, increasing the promotion and protection of their fundamental human rights, culture, and heritage, and adopting and strengthening legal frameworks based on the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Over the last 10 years, Canada and other member states have been committed to making changes on all levels, including policies, action plans, monitoring bodies, and education. This effort recognizes that the transatlantic slave trade has had devastating effects beginning in Africa. The trauma of this time continues even after the abolition of slavery in Canada. The people of Africa and their descendants continue to endure this devastating impacts and historic injustices of systemic racism and discrimination. As the International Decade for People of African Descent came to an end in 2024, on February 7th, 2024, the Government of Canada also committed to continue its efforts in addressing the needs of Black communities. The City of Toronto first proclaimed the decade in 2019, and in doing so, the city remains intent on eradicating anti-Black racism, implementing systemic change at all levels via the Toronto Action Plan for Confronting Anti-Black Racism, and further in the current development of the new 10-year action plan to confront anti-Black racism. Through partnership with the Black-led organizations and agencies dedicated to confronting anti-Black racism and increasing access and opportunities for Black residents, the City of Toronto is committed to improving the well-being of all communities. So it is therefore, on behalf of Mayor Olivia Chow and Toronto City Council, proclaimed the City of Toronto recognizes the second international decade for people of African descent from now until 2034 in the City of Toronto. So thank you all for allowing me those opening remarks, and we are going to dive into our meeting here today. We have before us 4 items for consideration on the agenda, and I understand we have 2 speakers here with us today to speak on the first item. So the first item is advancing action on the impact to action, final report on anti-Black racism in Toronto Police Services presentation requests. So we do, as I mentioned, and Gina, correct me if I'm wrong, have 2 speakers on this item. However, we don't have a presentation here today, and we will be having the Toronto Police Services Board represented in a presentation in a future meeting. So we will be moving to defer the item in terms of the presentation, but Gina, I'm just going to look to you to confirm whether we will go ahead with speakers on this item or whether the speakers would reattend once the presentation comes up at a future meeting.
That may be that's a question that can be put to the speakers if they wish to speak on the item now or or at the future meeting when the item is before the committee to consider.
Okay. So I will be moving the deferral. So I just wanted to confirm that. Gina, if you could confer with the speakers and just let us know if they would like to proceed with some remarks or whether we should have them come back with and join us. And I believe it will be the our next meeting, June 9th, to defer this item. So the motion
Okay.
before us.
Actually, we do just need to make sure to speak with the speakers first. I believe that they are both with us online.
Perfect. Sorry, I don't have the names with me here, Gina. So I'll just look to you to confirm and let us know whether they would like to proceed.
The first speaker is Bo Duquesne.
Hi, Bo. Can you hear us?
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you. Would you like to go ahead and share some remarks on this item this morning, or would you like to come back with us once we get a chance to have a presentation and ask questions of the service?
I would be fine either or.
Okay,
I can also submit mine by writing too, and address it when you're ready.
that's fantastic. Why don't we get your remarks in writing for now? And with our thanks, I appreciate you joining us today. I think it will be really meaningful to have your voice as part of the conversation when we have the full discussion. Does that sound good?
It's fine with me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And the second speaker, Gina?
Is Miguel Avila Velarde.
Awesome. Good morning, Miguel. Are you with us here virtually? If you'd like to unmute and just let me know if you'd like to share some remarks at this time. I see you. Can we make sure Miguel has a chance to unmute? I see your video, Miguel. Just unmute. There you go.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good
Yes,
morning.
I would like to share this opportunity to lend my voice of support. Although we don't have anybody from the TPS board to give us a presentation, I understand it. This will be deferred until June or July this year.
Mhm.
Hopefully, then the committee will be able to ask questions.
Absolutely.
I'm here to bring to your attention.
Sorry, Miguel, just gonna stop you for 1 second. We will go ahead and start your time and give you your 5 minutes, okay?
Oh, okay, fantastic.
Awesome. Go ahead. Thank you.
All right, so what I would like to share with this committee is that there are activities happening at the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee of the City of Toronto. We are incorporating a new agenda plan, a new work plan for the Indigenous Advisory Committee, and I was successfully able to convince my sisters and brothers at the Indigenous Committee that this city of Toronto needs a anti-Indigenous racism strategy. And I spoke about this committee and the work they're doing for the Black community, our sisters and brothers, that are facing similar challenges and injustices like the high levels in incarceration of Black and Indigenous people, and the lack of opportunities for housing, for jobs, etc., etc. So I thank the Black community for being ahead and doing this work, and the wonderful people that sits in this table, including my brother Walid, who I work with him in Regent Park to improve our community. And it is important to notice that there are several people of indigenous background, and we are facing also the same challenges. So we want to work together, and we want to also ask you I want to invite you to come and join us in our next meeting. They're trying to figure out what agency can provide with a presentation on the work that is being done in the city of Toronto like yours, because we don't have a place. I assume the consultant will figure it out, but we don't have a model that we can try to emulate, implement in the city of Toronto. Um, Similarly, one of the challenges I am presenting to the work plan is to include an Indigenous representative to sit at the Toronto Police Services Board. It is important to have the voices of Indigenous people at the board because decisions made affects our lives. And it is important that in 2025, moving forward, we have a voice at the table from the indigenous community. So again, what I want to say is, please help us with your knowledge, with your advice to our advisory committee, and how we can develop our first anti-indigenous racism strategy based on your model, based on the progress you're doing, because for me, it's an inspiration to see you guys. To see you guys on right now, I would like to see that copycat and the Indigenous Affairs, Aboriginal Affairs Advisory, so that both communities, work together in because we are the most affected ones by the prison system and the law enforcement and all injustices we know. I don't need to repeat them. So I look forward to hear the president. I mean the chair of the board in June, and ask the questions. How we can ensure that there is an anti-black strategy for the Toronto Police Services, because we don't want to see the injustices that happened in the past again to be repeated over and over and over. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Miguel. I really am grateful for you joining us today. Although we are not getting a presentation and we are going to look to defer, we do have the Executive Director of the Toronto Police Services Board listening. So thank you for the opportunity to share about that desire. And I know we will continue to work in community and in solidarity with one another to advance our shared goals. So thanks, Miguel. And I'm sure you'll be back to join us for the next meeting to share some remarks from the presentation as well. Thank you for your work. So I believe, Gina, those are all the speakers on this item. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So members, with your indulgence, as I mentioned, I do have a motion, and I understand just in conversation with members and with the vice chair, we want to keep this tied together with the OHRC, which we're working to have in June. So the motion before you is consideration of this item be deferred. So discussion and debate until June 9th, 2025 meeting of our group when we get a chance to have a presentation and have a more fulsome discussion. Do I need a seconder, Gina? You guys would think I would know by now. I'm still learning on the
No,
job.
seconders are not needed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All in favor of deferral of this item until June 9th meeting? Just by a show of hands. Thank you so very much. That's wonderful. And we'll continue to work with our colleagues to make sure that they're ready to go with that presentation for that date. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us this morning as well, Doobie. We look forward to having you back in June. So, sorry, and any opposed? Seeing none? Thank you. So that carries. So as I mentioned, our Councillor Shelley Carroll, our chair of the Toronto Police Services Board, and Dr. Ken Gisser-Doobie, our executive director of the Toronto Police Services Board, will be rejoining us in June, along with colleagues from the board to make a presentation and to take our questions and for us to take it into committee for further discussion. So moving on, our next item is the CR 5.2 Avenues Policy Review. I know we have some colleagues from City Hall, from the City of Toronto, who will be giving a presentation. Kyle and Kyle, welcome Kyle and Kyle. Thanks for joining us today for our meeting. Happy to turn it over to you for your presentation, and then we'll take it into committee for any questions of members. Thank you. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks so much, Deputy Mayor. Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm going to share a quick presentation with you. We were actually back with you, if you recall, in September. And now we are back again and with an update for you. We were just at council last week with this. So with that, I will share my screen. Okay. Okay, and everyone can see that okay? Perfect. Okay, so here to talk to you about the Avenues Policy Review. So just a quick refresher on the background, this is actually part of the Housing Action Plan. So the city's Housing Action Plan had a mandate for city planning. It covered a few areas, but one of which was updating the official plan and specifically our policies around what we call avenues. There were a few parts of that mandate that I'll get into. One is updating the vision and policy direction for our avenues, really because these policies have been in place since 2002. Next was streamlining study requirements. Of course, as being part of facilitating more housing in the city of Toronto, we were looking to see if we can streamline certain elements that maybe we don't need after 20 years of use. And looking at something called areas of transition, and that's the areas between our avenues and our neighborhoods, as well as extending and introducing new avenues. So just another quick refresher on the official plan and how it's structured, because it's relevant to our discussion today. So the official plan has 5 chapters in what we call the parent plan. It's the overarching official plan document. Our chapter 1 has our priorities, our vision and principles. We actually updated that last year in April of 2024, and the council adopted that new chapter. And it speaks to having a city of complete communities, an inclusive city, being the most inclusive city in the world, and a city that contributes to a just future for Indigenous peoples. Chapter 2 is about our growth strategy. It lays out what we call the urban structure, which is basically where we say we want to grow and where we don't want to grow. And if you look on the right there's a graphic that shows maps that are associated with each chapter. So chapter 2, for example, there on the right, it has maps 1 through 6 in the plan, one of which is the urban structure. Next is our chapter 3. It talks about the stuff that makes a city living nice and livable. So our human, our built, our economic and natural environments. Next is our chapter 4. Chapter 4 is about implementing that vision and urban structure, and it does so through what we call land use designations. And you can see that related on the graphic to the right there next to the number 4. And those are where we say, things are neighborhoods or they're mixed use areas. Those are our land use designations. And then chapter 5 is how we implement all of that. So a bit about the project. We started this work back in 2023. Again, you can see we were at Cabrak back in September. And then finally, we are here. We just brought our final report to council last week, where it was adopted by council. We also had our open house earlier in January. So we're on to another phase of the work, which is more consultation. It's an implementation phase, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a second. So the engagement that we did for the first phase of this avenues work was pretty extensive. We had over 16 public meetings. 12 are district-based, so we did 3 in each one. So that's 3 specifically in Scarborough, 3 in North York, 3 in Etobicoke. In addition to 3 citywide public meetings, we also had that open house in January. We also met with residents associations, BIAs, community housing providers in specific meetings. So we actually went out and met with them as specific groups. We also worked with the development industry and industry representatives. We also had several meetings with advocacy and research organizations, including the Black Planners and Urbanists Association. We also met with Build, and there was an online survey as part of the work. So we heard a few things primarily. We heard support for identifying those new avenues in order to enable more homes across Toronto. We heard support for mid-rise buildings along our avenues. And we also heard support for our non-residential or commercial uses on avenues. Some things we heard concerns about. Big one was the impact this has on existing businesses, the potential for the displacement of small businesses, impact on our neighborhoods and existing residents, and about the necessary infrastructure to accommodate growth. So I'm going to start to talk now about what the official plan amendment that the Avenues brought into effect actually includes. So if you've been following along with us, a few things changed between the draft that we presented to the public in the summer and what became the final OPA this winter. So in the summer, we were showing avenue typologies, things like nodes where avenues intersect, another type of study called a local area review. And what we brought forward to council this past month included much more simplified policies. You know, we really took back a lot of the feedback we were hearing, both from the public and from advocacy groups, as well as internal groups. Like we worked pretty closely with our colleagues over in CABR to try and address some of what we were hearing. So the first thing was that we were connecting growth back to our transit service levels. So more growth near our major transit stations and having mid-rise along our frequent transit along our major streets. Next was addressing the displacement of businesses. And we specifically include in the policies that these businesses are those that are owned by and serve our racialized and marginalized populations. And finally, we removed those study requirements. We had avenue studies and avenue segment reviews. They were tools in the official plan to study these areas more closely. We've done about 30 of them, so we had a lot of experience with them, and we were kind of getting the same result. So we decided to recommend removing those. Okay, so a couple of highlights and key points about the amendment. So first, it just updates the chapter 2 of the official plan and that associated map. So if you recall back to the structure of the official plan. Next is it aligns our growth with our transit. That's something that was part of chapter 1 and one of the principles of the official plan. So what the work really does is it provides a vision for our avenues. And I'll show you a map in a sec so you can see where in the city this applies to. But the vision for the avenues is up to mid-rise buildings for the majority of them. And where those avenues are close to a subway, LRT, or GO station, we can have more growth. Now that's bracketed by, transitioning down and away from our stations in terms of height and density. And also that growth has to be, contextually appropriate. And that's all in the amendment. We can talk more about that if you like. And next is that our growth is directed to specific land use designations. Those are those chapter 4 designations. And these are our growth designations, which are mixed use areas and apartment neighborhoods. Next, just to point out that we are still securing our infrastructure the same way we always have, which is through our development charges and also through our community benefits charge. And then finally, just to, hopefully make clear is that the amendment that went to council last week, there's no changes in our land use designations. We're not changing anything from neighborhoods to mixed use. And there are no rezonings as part of the amendment. That's going to that's part of a future phase of work. And I'll talk about that shortly. And then just a couple of highlights for you. So this was also part of the amendment that council adopted last week. The first is we heard a lot about, when you have development on our avenues, which are really our major streets that can, often be commercial strips that people rely on for, accessing everyday services and amenities, is that when development occurs, that we make sure that they provide uses that activate the ground floor. And what that really means is that we make sure they provide space for commercial and institutional uses, our shops, our services, daycares, and even schools. Next is addressing our displacement of small businesses. And you heard me talk about that a moment ago, but there's a few parts to it. Of course, the Planning Act gives us a certain set of tools, and we really tried to stretch what we were able to do there. So the first is that we direct applicants to consult with local communities and the existing businesses throughout the application process. In terms of what that community's needs are. The next is to notify any existing small businesses where that application is located. This is in response to something we heard a lot of, particularly in our plazas, where if there's a small business that's leasing in that space, they aren't currently required to be notified if there's a development application. So this is just to make sure they know what's going on. Next is we are also now directing that there's an assessment for the return of a displaced business, which wasn't something we had in policy before. And then finally, we're encouraging commercial community land trusting co-op models because we understand that this is an important component of trying to keep our local businesses alive in these areas. So this is the map of the new avenues. Those new avenues are in purple. As you can see, we've added a lot of geography across the city. So again, it would be mid-rise buildings for the majority of them, and you may go beyond them within major transit. But again, it's tied to those growth land use designations. So it has to be mixed use before that could occur. So I'm just going to cover council's direction really quickly. So first, it was to adopt the official plan amendment. So again, this was last week on February 5th. The second piece is directing staff on phase 2 of this work. So if we look back to the housing action plan, there was direction to look at providing as of right development permissions. And so phase 2 is going to look at doing that in these areas. Now, of course, there's a lot of work involved with that. And the first step is to actually consult with our local communities in greater detail on that work. And to, of course, coordinate with our ward councilors. And council was very specific about that last week. So this is sort of our roll up our sleeves and really get to work time. Next is council gave us direction to prioritize certain areas, and those are those around our subway, our LRT, and our GO stations. And of course, as part of that, to make sure we're looking at the infrastructure capacity in those areas. Next is council directed us to indeed remove those study requirements, to also monitor and report back on the policy changes that were adopted. So we're actually going to look at these areas, the types of growth we're seeing, to see what unit mixes we're getting, how people are getting around in terms of transportation. And of course, we have in-flight avenue studies right now, and so we have direction to continue and conclude those. And so just to recap on the next steps. So the next steps for this work is phase 2. And again, there's really 2 parts to it. One is that we go out and we do consultation and a comprehensive review of these areas, because we're going to go into each ward, again, working with the ward councilors to identify folks that need to be discussed with and consulted with. We have a pretty big list already, but there's always room for improvement. And again, next is to prioritize those areas that are near our subway stations, our LRT stations, and again, to monitor the policies here. So that's it for the presentation. Happy to take any questions. I'll just take the slide deck down for now.
Thank you, Kyle. Really appreciate you walking us through that. And I've spent a lot of time with avenues the last few weeks, so I will look to my my advisory colleagues if there are any questions for Kyle on the information that was shared with us, or any of the impacts or implications. Waleed, I see your hand up. You've got 5 minutes. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Pardon me. I just want to interject and ask members to turn their cameras on, so we can count you for quorum.
Yes. Thank you, Gina. I'm trying to figure out the best setup for my screen so I can see as many people as possible. But right now I've only got a couple of folks across the top. But yes, if members could please show us your lovely faces as we move through our conversation, that's most appreciated. And we'll let Waleed jump on in with 5 minutes questions to staff. Go ahead, Waleed.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morley. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Kyle. Sorry, my apologies. Thank you for the very eloquent presentation. I know there's great work that's been done. And I remember we had this conversation in the last year as well. My question to you is to maybe elaborate on what is the strategy when it pertains to procurement of small business owners or racialized business owners through opportunities that will come up through this policy? Like, what's the strategy for that? I'd love to get some feedback on that. And I love the fact that you consulted with neighborhood associations, which is great. and how will that engagement continue after the direction that you got from council? So that's another piece. And then the last thing is, how could members of the public be uh, more engaged? Is there going to be forums? Where will they be listed? How will this information be accessible? So I just want more details related to that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you for the questions, Waleed. On your first question about the local businesses, and I think you were kind of wondering how they're going to be involved in this process. Yeah, so we're gonna again be going into these local wards. The first thing is we'll be working with our community planning colleagues who know these areas very well, but we'll also be engaging with our ward councillors to make sure we're not missing any important voices in the room. So as we go through, we'll be double check and triple checking to make sure that no one is being missed there. Of course, you know, when we do this citywide work, it can be challenging to make sure we're getting in front of everyone. So there's a bit of repetition that will be involved there. So you'll be seeing a lot of social media posts from us. We'll be doing regular updates on the project webpage. We have a subscribers list that's already pretty big. It's about 1,200 folks are signed up to that, including a number of organizations. So we have a lot of touch points that already exist, but we want to keep reaching out into the communities more. And so again, working with our ward councillors and our colleagues in community planning is a big part of that. And if, for our residents associations, we're hoping to have more, I will call it intimate involvement with them. We're going to try and make it out to their actual resident association meetings. So that'll be part of the next phase of engagement. Again, our ward councillors will be keeping an eye on us to make sure that we are hitting all the appropriate voices, but we do have a list of 438 active residents associations that we are already in touch with. And we use the clerk's registry. So if you are aware of a group that is not registered, then please make sure that they do so, because that helps us get to them as well. Sorry, I saw your hand up, Floyd.
I just wanna encourage you to reach out to FOSTRA and FONTRA because they represent a lot of neighborhood associations in Toronto. I'm very involved with FOSTRA and FONTRA, and this policy has come up as well. So I think that would be meaningful engagement, and also I think it'd be great to also reach out to the development tables. I'm talking about the social development tables, whether it's in Regent Park or Alexander Park or other spaces, because you'll also have residents who are very engaged and will be interested in informing the strategy that I referred to earlier when it comes to engaging small business owners, also social enterprises in opportunities, so that we could minimize, if not eliminate, displacement altogether, and actually create economic opportunities for residents of Toronto. So that's my advice. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great suggestions. And Fontra and Foster, we had already worked with, and Fontra actually came and deputed and wrote a letter in support of the project, which was great. And we obviously appreciated that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Waleed. Thank you, Kyle. I just want to call out any additional questions from members on the Avenue policy and changes that were recently adopted by Council. I see Kathy, and then I see Queen. So we'll go Kathy and then Queen. Go ahead, Kathy.
Kyle, thank you very much for that presentation. Much appreciated, and for your openness to the suggestions put forward by Waleed as to additional spaces to outreach to. My question actually, it sounds as if there's been quite a comprehensive review and consultation, and that what you have outlined is for additional consultation with communities that might be impacted by this new plan. I would like to hear a little bit more detail about what might be the outcome of those consultations. And so if it, you're gathering information, but what happens to that information? What happens in the case that the plans are not aligned with what it is that the businesses and the residents of the communities would like to see, and so how are those differences negotiated specifically? So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Kathy. It's a great question. So the outcome ultimately is to, again, follow council's mandate to look at what we call redesignating and rezoning lands to allow for more housing across our avenues. Now, the avenues provide a structure for where we want to grow, but it is in that vision, it also limits, what, the city's saying its vision is for these areas. I just want to touch on that really quickly first. Um, when we said, up to mid-rise for the majority of those areas, right now, if you have a mixed-use designation, you can actually come in and apply for whatever height you want, and the official plan doesn't actually provide any guidance on that. So this is the first time we're actually saying, we want this type of height somewhere in the parent document like that. That's kind of a product of the plan's age because it was written back in 2002. It was intentionally left to be very broad. So, after about 20 years of experience, we found that we actually get mid-rise buildings along our avenues the majority of the time anyway. About 72% of our mid-rise buildings across the city already occur on our avenues. And that growth is actually pretty incremental. We get about 23 developments per year on the avenues currently. So anyway, the outcome is to recommend redesignating and rezoning to sort of facilitate that in these areas that are identified on that map. So more avenues, more mid-rise buildings is kind of the idea. And so through the consultation, we'll first be doing some analysis to develop a set of criteria for how we'll be recommending parcels for that, because we're getting into this fine-grained portion of the work where we're looking at specific parcels. Before we do that, we'll want to make sure we've developed criteria with public input. So that's sort of the next step, is we'll be coming out with, here's how we think we should identify these. And it'll be criteria that are like, not near our green space, please, like not on top of things where we don't want that kind of growth. Where we know we want to have more services and things like that, or where there's already a cluster of mixed use maybe. So that'll be the first step, and then that will guide us in recommending land use and rezoning changes. Then we'll come back to the public for input on that in each area.
If I might follow up.
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay. So it is understood that there would be some consultation, but I guess the question is how are differences negotiated? So yes, we do need more housing. That's a given, but you've already have heard feedback that are concerns about, let's say, displacement of Black-owned businesses or racialized businesses, and you may have already heard feedback about the kinds of growth that people would like to see, let's say, in the buildings of these new high rises that go up, and so there will be differences of opinions in relationship to that, and what is the accountability mechanism for making certain that within the directing the need to increase housing and community growth, that the actual issues that are raised are addressed by the communities that will be impacted. And so that's the part I still haven't heard yet. So if you can explain that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure, Kathy. And I know we're over time, Deputy Mayor.
No, you're good. I was going to say, please feel free to give as fulsome as an answer as you need. And if we need to come back for a second round as well, Kathy, if there's additional clarifying questions, we'll definitely do that. Go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, and a great question. And sorry for the earlier explanation if it was a bit long-winded, but when we go through that criteria work and then we select, areas, it's all part of, what we have to ultimately provide to council is a professional opinion based in good planning. And that good planning has to be grounded in the public interest, because, we have a policy framework in Ontario. The official plan tells us, how we want to grow. And the chapter 1 vision statements and all that about, not just housing, but good communities and all that are sort of what guide us through some of those debates. Now, of course, that consultation process is twofold. One is that we're obviously going to hear folks at that stage when things are draft and we're just working our way through the problems. And then ultimately, when we bring forward an amendment to council for consideration, that's another venue where folks can say, I don't think you really got it here and here. And so there'll be going through Planning and Housing Committee first. So that'll be the first sort of kick at the can. And then that'll further go to council as well for ultimate adoption. So there's sort of those feedback loops. If you really think we didn't get it right, you can tell us how bad we got it wrong at committee and council as well.
Thank you.
Kyle, we might come back if there's any more, Kathy, but I'm gonna pitch over to Queen. Go ahead, Queen. You got 5 minutes for questions.
Hi, yes, thank you for your presentation. I have 2 questions. I was wondering, has there been any attempt to connect with artists, specifically racialized artists? And is there a specific part of the plan that speaks to affordable housing for artists?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not specifically artists. Again, we were back at this committee back in September, but we're always open to finding new ways to connect with more people. So we're totally open to your suggestions if you have a way you think that would help with both getting the word out for the work, but also help people, get their input in. That being said, the policies that council adopted last week do include provision for affordable housing on the avenues. It's in the first policy about like what our vision is for these things, and providing affordable housing, not for any specific group, but just for Torontonians as a whole, is part of the vision for these areas. Yeah.
Good, Queen. Any follow-ups? Sorry, I see Kyle Packman's going to jump in on that one as well. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to add as well that I think, one of as Kyle was mentioning, the vision for the avenues is that a lot of these avenues are supposed to play this kind of Main Street role where you have a diversity of commercial uses and institutional uses. And so I think one of our hopes and one of the visions for the avenues is that we're creating more spaces for local businesses to set up shop. We know that across Toronto, I used to live in Scarborough around Melbourne, and you had to drive everywhere to access, to go to the grocery store, to go to the corner store. And so our hope is that by identifying more avenues and setting out this vision and the policies that implement the vision will create these new spaces that maybe could accommodate these local businesses. Just a quick anecdote, which is that I'm in Regent Park, and it's really interesting. There's actually some live work units in Regent Park that are set up by there seems to be like a local art studio and photography studio, and so the avenues. It's a big kind of broad level policy, but I think the hope is that as that sort of trickles down to development applications, we'll be able to negotiate and get space for more businesses across Toronto. So not specifically addressing kind of the affordable housing and workspace for artists, but I think again by creating more opportunities for these kinds of spaces, we might be able to see more of these kinds of establishments set up in communities across Toronto.
Thanks, Kyle. Any follow-up, Queen? Are you all good? Sorry, I lost you on my screen.
It's okay. I just wanted to say, I'll reach out as well, but I think it's important to name specific groups, not just artists, but priority groups that are in need of these particular opportunities, and name that in the recommendations. Because I feel like when you leave things broad and loose, it leaves too much room for people to miss out on positioning opportunities for people who need it the most. But I'll email you and we can talk more about that. And yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Queen. I'm also just thinking about the work of the Toronto Music Advisory Committee, TMAC, that runs out of the city, and they were having a specific discussion, and I think they have a working group on artist housing. And so I think that would also be maybe be a good one to connect in with the specific advocacy of like Black artist housing needs to be, a target, a specific target as well as part of that work. Maybe there's some collaboration our group could do with that group as well. So I'm happy to connect in with you as well offline and make that connection. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. And Kyle, I'm just looking members across my screen. If there are others with any questions, yep, Lucina, jump on in. You got 5 minutes for questions.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. So hi, Kyle. I was just wondering, and I may have misheard or misunderstood, but so with the current or the recent council direction, it's my understanding that there was a removal of study requirements for avenues. I'm just wondering if you could speak more to whether that's been replaced with any sort of uh, different impact assessment or something like that, recognizing that the purpose of initial studies or reviews were to assess the impacts of like incremental development. So I'm just wondering, yeah, what really took place of that and whether we're still assessing the inequities that could arise from development. And then my second question pertains to the displacement of businesses. I think a policy highlight that was mentioned was the assessment for the return of those displaced businesses. And so if you could perhaps clarify what we mean by that assessment, at the risk of that being some sort of gatekeeping mechanism, for example, for some businesses to return um, to return to a home per se. Yes, if you could just speak to those two pieces.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for the questions. So I will start with, and if I miss something, please let me know if I get lost. So on the studies, the it's interesting because the policies were around for over 20 years. We actually got a lot of muscle memory in looking at these areas. Toronto had about 178 kilometers of avenues. It took us over 20 years to study about 44% of those. And that was through over 30 separate studies. Um, and in the meantime, we kind of grew up as a city. We started to see a lot of development in these areas, and we started to develop other policies and documents that helped guide how growth occurs on them. So, for example, we developed built form policies that are now in the official plan and help guide what mid-rise and tall buildings look like and how they interact with the space around them. And we also have our mid-rise design guidelines, which just recently got updated, that look at things like setbacks and shadowing and a whole host of issues that occur when redevelopment like this happens. And a lot of that was informed, just like this work, by those previous 30 studies where we really learned a lot in terms of what these areas are like and how to plan for them. Um, and they didn't really specifically touch on issues of, at least for a lot of those avenue studies, on issues around equity. But that's something that I think the city has done a lot of learning on in the last few years. And as far as the official plan goes, Chapter 1 really speaks to equity as a guiding principle for how we plan. And one of the principles for Chapter 1, which guided these policies and how we'll implement them, is equity. It's also inclusion. Again, it's a city that is trying to be the most inclusive city in the world. And those are things that we now have to actually speak to when we write policies like this and when we consider development applications as well. Um, I may be missing something, Kyle. Was there something you wanted to touch on there?
I guess just to the point about sort of how does the displacement of businesses sort of get addressed through these policies? So as Kyle mentioned, so there is sort of a new policy within that avenue section that we've been talking about, which is really kind of a new feature that we really don't see aside from maybe a few sort of what we call secondary plans. So like there's the Jane and Finch secondary plan, There's a secondary plan for Downsview. So these are kind of these strategic planning documents, but for specific areas. This is sort of with the avenues, this is the first time that we're implementing a policy that really touches all sort of all corners of Toronto. And the way that it's sort of intended to work, and again, I think one of the struggles that we faced with figuring out how to address this issue that we're seeing across our avenues and other areas that are experiencing lots of growth is that we have our sort of planning act, which really kind of limits what we as city planners can require as part of when applications come in for developments. But in conversations with folks across city planning and other divisions, we realized that what we could ask for when an application comes in for development on a site that has a small business or a community service provider is that there be at minimum a conversation about the redevelopment, but also about that potential return. And so you asked specifically what that assessment would look like. That's something that we're still figuring out, and it'll be providing some guidance sort of through phase 2 to community planning. So when a developer comes in for an application, we can give them some advice on how to undertake that assessment. But I think one of the things that we've heard is that displacement is a really tricky issue to deal with because often when there's a development application, the business has to leave, and if they are able to find a new location and they set up shop there, they're there for 2 or 3 years while the building's being built, and so they may establish themselves in another location. So I think, anyways, all to say it's a bit tricky and it's something that we still need to figure out. But the first phase was just to have that idea there and to get that into the official plan.
Thank you, Kyle. I see Waleed has a follow-up question. I just wanted to see if there's any other members who haven't had a chance yet. And then if members agree, we can go ahead with a second round for anybody who's already asked a question. Any other new faces wanting to jump in with questions here? Not seeing any hands. And just unmute and call me out if I'm not catching you. Apologies. But if folks agree, can I get a general nod? We're good for a second round of questions. Yeah, can I get a nod? A head nod. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Waleed, 5 more minutes over to you for questions. And if there's anyone else who'd like a follow-up round, please let me know.
I'm going to make it brief. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morley. I'm going to make this a brief remark and a question as well, so to both Kyles. The question I have is from the Metrolinx saga in Little Jamaica. I know there's a lot of businesses that were displaced. Was there any learning that came out of that to inform your policy? And then, I'm from Regent Park as well, Kyle. I'm glad you live in our neighborhood. And there's a right to return that was committed to residents when it came to addressing displacement. Was that also considered when it comes to small businesses or folks who might be impacted by this policy? So those are the 2 simple questions. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, this was informed by that work. One of the key differences is that Metrolinx has different statutory authority. Just under law, they're able to do things that we are not able to. Again, we are sort of limited by what the Planning Act allows us to do in terms of trying to enforce, landowners having certain tenants, what their relationship would be in terms of, forcing them to have someone come back into a development. And so what this policy really does is stretch what we've done in the past and put it in writing that actually you have to talk to folks, and you have to notify them if you're coming in with an application, which wasn't happening before. We heard a lot of stories about folks in plazas in particular that were kind of blindsided by an application that was going in on their site. And so this policy changes that and it builds it into our current consultation process, but also asks, the local community to inform the process, hey, what kind of services do you want to see around here? Right? So trying to bring it back to the ground level of what that area is all about and make sure the development is reflecting that to the best we can actually enforce.
Does that answer, Walid? Any follow-up from there?
It's the right to return piece. If you could touch on that.
Yeah, so that's something that the Planning Act doesn't allow us to do, in other words. Yeah.
And I know you mentioned, Walid, and sorry, I'm not staff, I'm not to jump in, but we do have specific legislation that we can enforce around residential right to return, but that does remain to be an open question, and I think, frankly, a bit of a policy area for additional work is around how do we support and secure that right for small businesses, which is not currently something that's enforceable, but an important call out, and we know what the impacts can look like, without some kind of a mechanism in place. So really appreciate you probing in on that. Any other members wanting to have a second round here? Kathy, Lucina. Yep, Kathy, go ahead, jump on in. Sorry, love, just gotta unmute. We can't hear you. Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor Amber Morley. The comment that was just made and the understanding that there isn't any right to return for businesses makes me think that, many of our businesses are leased or rentals. And so if there is no policy about that require developers to enforce a right to return, then it speaks to the need to have some planning in place and some resources in place in order to support our racialized businesses and Black businesses to own their own space. And so this may be over, I don't know if this is a part of the policy or might be included in the policy, but what resources are there in order to support business ownership as to develop our community for our community, so that we can ensure that Black businesses and racialized businesses will remain and not at the whim of the developer to decide who they want to come back. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will stress that while the policy that council adopted really, I think, does stretch what we've done in the past as far as it can go in terms of forcing a conversation between the developer and those businesses. First of all, letting them know what's going on and having a plan to look at whether they can accommodate them in the new development. We're pushing that conversation to everybody. But also something I think was important enough to us that we heard that it is now as part of the explanatory text in the official plan is the importance of things like community land trusts and co-op models to sort of facilitate and protect for those owned, businesses for marginalized groups across the city. So we've called that out because we know that while it's not a planning and land use matter per se, it was important as part of the broader picture for how we, protect these areas and the businesses in them.
Yeah, no, and sorry, I'll just add on that. So you might be familiar that the city just adopted a new 10-year action plan for Toronto's economy. It's called Sidewalks to Skylines. And as part of that, Action 11 looks at how to sort of address small local business displacement, either through construction, as was the case for Little Jamaica and the Crosstown LRT, as well as for development projects. And so one of the actions under that is to create what they're calling a Main Street Resiliency Fund to help address the business displacement and look at opportunities for a commercial replacement policy. And so that's something that our ECDEV colleagues are taking a look at. But I just wanted to make you aware that there's other projects happening sort of across the city that are looking at this issue.
Thanks, Kyle. Any follow-up, Kathy? So I'm looking for you on my screen. All good? Perfect. What's coming up for me as well is I understand, and I'm not sure where where announcements are at, or haven't followed it as closely, but I know the federal government are also looking at additional funds and resources to support the kind of I think direction that you mentioned, Kathy, around moving into ownership, right, as members of the Black community, in order to really ensure our sustainability into the future and the viability of businesses, and more, frankly, of a strong position to have those conversations with developers and others, right? When you're an owner at the table and they're buying up the space or whatever, I think there's a stronger position than when you're leasing a space, for example. So I think there's other pieces that we'll want to pay attention to and socialize amongst this group, and of course, get the word out within our communities. Thank you for those great questions. Anybody else with questions? I actually have one or two that I'm going to pop in, but Lucina, go ahead. Yeah, go for it. 5 minutes.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Morley. So I am additionally curious about the encouragement of community land trusts. I'm a big fan of CLTs, and I know that they're a really, like they're, as an affordable housing strategy, they're really picking up in terms of supply of affordable housing and doing so in a very community-driven way. And of course, there is increasing recognition that municipalities can take action to address the housing crisis by making publicly owned lands available for leasing for housing development. So I'm just curious, could you speak to some of the concrete strategies that you're adopting to advance that policy highlight or policy momentum to increase the availability of community land trusts?
Yeah, sure. And there might be other folks on the call who are actually have more expertise in this. Um, for us, as part of the official plan, which is ultimately a land use document and a planning document, we wanted to make sure that this piece of the puzzle was being spoken to, so that when people go and look at the policies, they understand sort of some of the ideas that they can then follow up on. And we do give a shout out to the number of policies and programs across the city. It's not really city planning that gets involved in grant funding and stuff like that, but I can certainly follow up with you with some more information that some of the other teams at the city are working on in relation to that.
Just wondering, Gina, do we have anybody else on the call that might be able to speak from the staff perspective? I'm not sure if folks maybe in Housing Secretariat or anybody might be able to address that in a little bit more detail. Sorry to put you on the spot. I don't know if we asked them in advance to join, but I know there is some more information. We'd appreciate getting that connected if we can.
Yeah, Lucina, maybe we can follow up after with you about that.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
Awesome.
All good, Lucina? Any additional questions for you? All good? Perfect. Just wanted to do a final call out to members if there's anybody else with questions here on the Avenue policy. Just looking across my screen, not seeing any hands up. I think for me, I just want, and I really thank everybody for the questions. I think a lot of important themes have come up, and give you all some work to do as you move into phase 2 of this work. I just wanted to dig in a little bit on the contextually appropriate piece, and what mechanisms are in place. So, we hear about gentrification, we hear about displacement, and I think one of the things that we often are always trying to find the right balance as we grow is neighborhood characteristics and again that contextual appropriateness. Can you talk to us a little bit more just about what mechanisms are in place as part of this new policy and this work to protect for and ensure that communities' voices and that again contextual piece that is usually very local and very different depending on the neighborhood is, continues to be central to our growth as a city.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, for planners anyway, we use this phrase of contextually appropriate, and there's a few things to unpack there for sure. What does it mean?
Mhm.
Um, And the first thing it always means for us is the policy framework. What do the policies say about a specific area?
Mm.
Because of course we live in this top-down structure of, we have the Planning Act, then we have our provincial policy statement. Those are very broad documents. Then it takes us down to the official plan level that we've been talking about today. And then it gets into more granular stuff like our secondary plans, what are called site and area specific plans that provide more localized frameworks, which can be anything from a couple parcels to whole blocks. And so that's the first step of looking at the context. But then next is, of course, the built form of the area.
Right.
How is it evolved over time? We also look at our metrics in terms of the data for growth in a certain area. We'll look at, how is the demographics changing? Are there a lot of growth pressures there? And so all of that has to go into an analysis that, ultimately forms, what is the context here? What does make sense? And of course, and I'm sure you've heard me say it a few times, but what is the transit and servicing like here? Do we have enough community centers? What is the picture for schools? And of course, some of those things you start to touch on other levels of government and their authority. But yeah, and schools being a prime example of that, right? But for us as planners, that sort of helps guide the contextual analysis. And again, this policy is really about connecting the dots between our transit, our services, and where we want to grow.
That's great. Super helpful. And we also know that we still have like community consultation meetings on individual applications as they come through. And so there's often still quite a significant amount of opportunity for people to weigh in, not just on the wider policy conversations, but on the individual projects, right, that are coming forward in alignment with these policies. That's fantastic. Thanks, Cal. I'll leave it at that for my questions. And we'll call that for the question period, but just wanting to open the floor to members who want to make any comments or remarks about the avenues policy, the potential impacts, and any general thoughts or feelings that folks want to share. If anybody wants to jump in with comments or remarks, happy to hear from you. Just give me a wave. Yeah, Waleed, go ahead. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morley. Yeah, I think this is a great policy, and I'm really grateful for the presentation last year and the follow-up this winter. I really am grateful that there is an appetite to engage the public and many of these stakeholders, whether they're artists, and I just want to thank Queen for raising that point. But I also think it's important to also open up that conversation with Black-led organizations, especially business associations. Many small business owners are also Black. They're the many the mom and pop shops that you're going to see on our avenues. And I'm glad that we're talking about displacement because it's very important. We've had experience with that, but it's important to also recall that there have been funds, and I'm glad Kyle referred to one example of a fund that is going to support small businesses or businesses that may be going through that transition so that there's no displacement. And I'm looking forward to the policy changes that will come out of these discussions to address the right to return for small business owners. This is the big challenge. The makeup of a neighborhood or a community could be altered significantly if we don't address those policy challenges effectively, informed by all stakeholders. So, in conclusion, I think this is a great policy, and I'm glad that we as an advisory committee have been consulted to provide feedback, and we look forward to further conversation. So, thank you so much to both Kyles.
Thank you, Waleed. Any other members wishing to make a comment on this item? Yep. Charis or Cherise, sorry, correct me on your pronunciation.
Charis.
Charis, wonderful. The floor is yours, Charis. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I don't need 5 minutes. I just want to say that I really appreciate that the map, that the avenues on the map have been extended, because the last time when we were presented with this, I was remarking that the northwest corner, the two northwest corner, the northwest and the southwest corner of the city were not included in the map. And now I see that the avenues have been expanded to those areas. So I'm really pleased to see that. So thank you, Kyle and Kyle.
Fantastic. Thank you. Um, love to see when our input makes a difference, right? It's beautiful to see. So thank you for calling that out, Chairs, and thank you for your advocacy and your feedback in in that regard as well. Any other members wishing to comment on Avenues policy? Apologies, I'm just scanning across my screen here. Seeing none, I will just say, with our thanks to both Kyles and the teams that are supporting this work, we are growing as a city. We are continuing to change and evolve. And I always think of the work that folks like yourselves in the civil service are like the brain of it all, right? Of policies and documents and very specific frameworks. And committees like ours and folks like myself in leadership roles, we're often try to bring the heart, right, of the communities forward and the real experiences on the ground. And then the work that we get to do together is about marrying those two things up, and having a healthy, functioning, body that we all can be proud of and thrive together. So, really grateful for the audience today, for the work that you've shared, and for the opportunity for our committee to provide some thoughts, feedback, and we'll continue to monitor the work and look forward to having you back once you move through the second phase. Thank you so much. So we do need a motion, I believe, to receive this item. Let me check the script here, folks. So we've had our speakers, we've had this. So we need a motion to receive the item. Can I have anybody want to move that motion? Awesome, Chairs. That's great. We'll have you move that. And a seconder. Need a seconder, Gina? Yep. Thanks,
We don't
Queen.
need seconders.
No seconder. Okay, sorry guys. I swear I'm gonna get better at this. That's great. We just need a mover. Thank you so much. Chairs has moved that. All in favor of receiving this item, show of hands. Thank you so much. Any opposed? Seeing none, that item is received. Thank you so much. So we've just got a couple additional quick ones. I think we'll finish before lunch. Let me not jinx it, and no rush at all. Very much enjoying our morning together. But our next item is the schedule of meetings for 2025. So just wanting to open up the floor to members if there are any questions about this item or any speakers to this item on the proposed schedule of meetings before us. Yep, Queen, jump on in. Go ahead.
Trying to fighting to open the document, but I just wanted to comment that
Mhm.
I think we need to reconsider as well the time for the meeting. I think the meeting today was even scheduled for like 9:30 to 10:45 or something like that. I think we should consider like expanding the time because we never finish at 10:45.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
I think we should expand the time for it so that at least two people, when they're coming, they know that they're going to be here a set amount of time. And then if we finish earlier, it's
Yep,
wonderful.
absolutely. Maybe that we can just pitch that question to staff because I blocked out until 1 o'clock on my calendar. I wasn't sure, right? Just in case, because you already know, right? Yep. Gina, can you just confirm for us what is the official length of time? Is there an official end time, or is it sort of the time that it takes for business? Is there a way that we can more appropriately reflect, a a greater chunk of time together as part of our meetings? Can you talk to us a little bit about the parameters of that?
Sure. Meetings actually are not scheduled with an end time. We do
Okay.
schedule a start time, and the meetings continue for as long as it takes for all the business to be considered.
Okay, that's super helpful. And I wonder if maybe we work to make sure that that's crystal clear, or at least blocking like a full work, like a 9:30 to 5 kind of thing, when we schedule meetings in and send out the calendar invites, just to give the latitude. And as I'm sure I know, I've heard the agendas are often quite heavy and there's a lot to get through, and obviously a lot of important discussion. So I think that's might be helpful for members. Is that something we can incorporate in our practice going forward?
Um, for this advisory committee, we actually don't send out calendar invites. We send out a link to the WebEx connection details when we do distribute the agenda.
Okay. It's connection details, but not a calendar invite. Okay, good to know. Learning as I go. Um, yeah, I think maybe Queen, that's a great point. Maybe something that we can encourage members to undertake is to block a full day or at least until early afternoon when we know we've got lighter agendas. But I think that's something that we want to definitely get better at is giving ourselves the breathing room, the time and space that we need together. So thank you for flagging that. I see you with a follow-up, and then I'm going to come over to Cheris and then over to Dr. Beverly Jean. Go ahead, Queen.
Maybe there could be something in every time you send out the invites, something to remind people, something in the notes to remind people to block off the day.
Yeah.
Because I find oftentimes, especially when I've come in person, we've lost quorum because people only booked off a certain amount of time.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think it'd be important to just remind people every time of
Super
it.
helpful. Yeah. And maybe that's something that my team can also undertake is sending out, because I know Gina mentioned they just send the WebEx connection details. Maybe I can look to my team to send the calendar invites as well so that the time would be blocked. So I know my team is listening. I'll see if you could take that as a takeaway. I would appreciate it. And we can start to incorporate that on the go forward. Once we firm up these dates, we'll get those calendar invites sent over. Thank you, Queen. Cheris, over to you, and then Dr. Beverly Jean after you. Go ahead, Cheris. Just love, sorry, you gotta unmute for us. Thank you.
So sorry. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to remind you, my name, if you think about it, put a K instead of the CH.
Cheris.
Right.
Gotcha. Sorry, my apologies. Thank you for the
Oh
correction.
no, you're within the range of what people call me. I just wanted to say that considering that we are looking at additional dates, would that not make a difference in terms of the timing of the meetings? Because if we have more dates, then topics can be divided, have a shorter agenda for
Yes.
each meeting. So, so can we also consider that as we're looking at the timing?
Yes, it's a great point, Karis. And what I'll just say is that there's a process in order for the expansion of dates to potentially take place. So, just from an expectation management, as I understand, is if we're successful in moving this, it will more than likely take effect for next year, for 2026, where we have additional meetings. So, we're still going to likely be in a similar posture for the remainder of this year, where we just have what's on the books and still wanting to get through some denser agendas. So you are right. I think, when we are hopefully get to the place, once we are having additional meetings as part of our regular schedule, we would likely be able to confirm, right? Shorter dates, but there's a lot of work between, to move that forward. If we move and agree here as our committee, that will then go to I believe, the standing committee for approval, then over to council, and then we are set, and then clerks will proceed with, yeah, there's always a process, right?
Thank you
Yeah,
so much. I
no
forgot
worries.
that I'm
Yeah,
dealing with City Hall.
City Hall. Yes, absolutely. But it's a great point, and I'm sure clerks are listening and will take it away. Dr. Beverly Jean, Daniel, please jump on in.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Folks, I'd like to, and I'm speaking for myself. I am not in a position to book off an entire day for these meetings. I'm actually concerned that the manner in which the time that is used in the meetings is not always used most effectively. And I don't think that extending the meetings will actually take us to where we need to go. I would also argue that in terms of our ability to pay attention, it's usually, 2.5 to 3 hours,
Right.
right? And I am concerned that people may use this platform simply as an opportunity to just speak and keep speaking and keep speaking. And it may not necessarily move us to where we need to go. I would further like to argue that we need to figure out a strategy that allows for us to only have 2 to 3 items on the agenda at a given point in time.
Mm-hmm.
That way we can be more directed, we can be more concise, and we can work towards moving things forward as opposed to using these meetings as, I'm not quite sure. But I'm sorry, I am not in a position where I can, I mean, it's already difficult when I book off from, 9 to 12.
Right.
And then it's now 1 o'clock, it's now 2 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. So I would like to argue that we need to be able to use our time more directed, more efficiently. And I would even ask people to consider whether or not there is a need to have every single person comment on every single issue 3, 4, and 5 times.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it actually moves our agendas forward, and potentially slows down the impact that we can have.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate those comments. Thank you so much and well taken. Um, that I think is what we really do want to get to a better cadence of understanding how do we make the most effective use of our time together. I am a stickler with the timing as well, wanting to give people latitude, but being really intentional about um, you know, keeping us to procedures that will move us forward in a good way while still holding space for people to have their voices heard. So I appreciate that. And you'll note the next item is a motion from me to increase the number of meetings throughout the year so that we could look at the point that you made of having just 2 to 3 items to maybe max 3 to 4 items so we can have more focused and targeted discussions as opposed to, having an overwhelming amount that we just can't get through together. So, all of those comments are very well taken and appreciate the time spent together and that a full day might be beyond everyone who's working and balancing lots of busy schedules. So thank you for those comments, Dr. Beverly Jean, and we'll open the floor for others and then continue forward. Thank you, Waleed. Go ahead. And I'm just looking if anybody else has a hand up.
Just
No.
want to make the point that we are an advisory committee, we are a deliberative body. We have to be mindful that there will be opportunities uh, that must be offered to members of the public to depute
Mhm.
the advisory committee. So we're not city council.
Mhm.
We're here to provide advice to city council, and there's a lot of members of the public that really care about anti-black racism, and we want to depute in these spaces. So I'm in favor of more meetings. I think last year was a learning opportunity for all of us, especially when it came to the OHRC and TPS, ORC recommendations to TPS. This was a matter that was deliberated back in September of last year, and we're going to be having the discussion in June, right?
Mhm.
So let's just put things in perspective. We do need to have more meetings, and I strongly support it. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks, Waleed. So with that, I will move us forward. I'm not seeing any other hands up for folks to speak on this item, but appreciate the contribution. Um, because of the way that this meeting came about, we do need to make a sort of a technical motion here um, to have the committee amend our 2025 meeting schedule by deleting March 20th, which was originally scheduled, and replacing it with February 13th, as we've come together today. So this would look like the 4 dates through the course of 2025. Sorry, someone, Dr. William, we got you. Thank you so much. You've just muted for us. Thank you. So because we've replaced this meeting with the previously scheduled meeting in March, we just need to make that technical amendment. And then the other dates that were previously listed would remain. So February 9th, September 3rd, and November 25th of 2025 this year. As we discussed, I'll work with my team to have a calendar invite sent out, and from 9:30 to, I'll suggest about 3 o'clock. Appreciating that that is a long day, we'll hope to keep our agendas concise so that we can move through them in less time than that. But just in case and as needed, we appreciate that consideration. Hopefully, it's helpful for folks to organize themselves. So I'll move that motion with respect to the technical amendment, and clerks have just put it on the screen. Can I ask for all those in favor? Show of hands. Thank you very much. Any opposed? Show of hands. Seeing none. Um, that item carries, and that will be reflected in our official schedule. Thank you all so much for that. So we are going to move into our final item, number 4, which is, again, I spoke to this a moment ago, is increasing the number of meetings per year for our advisory committee. And again, part of the reason that I've moved that motion is in hearing from members about what the experience has been, the density of the agenda, the desire, to really have a bit more time and space to dig in and dig through these items. There is a process. Will need, if the motion here passes today, it will need to go through, the city's technical processes, standing committee, council, and then once approved, clerks can move forward with the planning of additional meetings. And again, sorry, clerks, do we have the motion prepared for that we can put onto the screen? I'm happy to move it and then open the floor for any discussion.
We can share the item.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great. And just again, looking to move from potentially from our current schedule of 4 meetings, we would be looking to amend the terms of reference and looking to expand the number of meetings per year for the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Committee to 6 times per year. So that is the motion. That is the item before us. Happy to open the floor for any discussion on this item, and looking for folks if you'd like to weigh in. Yeah, Lucina, please jump on in.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just a procedural question in terms of calling on those additional 2 meetings. I'm wondering if for 2026, we're looking at establishing the dates, all 6 dates in advance, or we're proceeding with scheduling the 4 dates and then calling an additional 2 as the need arises. I don't know if there's a distinction there. Perhaps a question for the clerks.
Yeah, great question. And I will look to you, Gina, if you can provide us some guidance on that.
Pardon me, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so I was just wondering for 2026, where we're exploring the addition of 2 meetings, whether the 6 meetings would be pre-scheduled in advance for the year, or we're looking at scheduling the 4 and then calling on up to an additional 2 or calling an additional 2 as the need arises, if that makes sense.
Oh, usually meetings for the following year are scheduled after City Council sets their meeting calendar. So after the meetings of council, the standing committees and the community councils are decided, that's when the scheduling for the council advisory bodies will begin. And at that point, provided that this is approved by council, up to 6 meetings would be able to be scheduled.
Okay, and when we say up to 6, will it be like prescriptively 6 meetings spread out throughout the year based on council calendar?
I would expect that we would be working with the program staff to determine the spacing of the meetings.
Okay, but it would be 6.
It could be up to 6, yes.
Sounds good. Thank you, Lucina, for the clarification. So my understanding at this point is if the terms of reference is approved through the channels, and if we have consensus here today, similar to how we've just approved for the 4 meetings for this coming year, for the following year, hopefully we'll have the 6 dates in front of us so that we can, of course, all plan accordingly. And we would, as the chair, I would work to encourage staff and the KBER unit to ensure that we have those dates firmed up at the beginning of the year so we can plan accordingly. At least that would be my goal. Thank you for the question, though, Lucina. Any other folks wanting to jump in with discussion or questions on the proposed expansion of meetings? Karis, go ahead.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. When I hear up to 6, I don't think 6. I think it could be 6. So I just want to say that. But also, I wonder if also it could be considered to not have the meeting in February, because
Yeah.
February is Black History Month and there are many activities and, you know, places that some of us need to participate. So if whatever is happening with the calendar, please do not put February.
Thank you, Karis. I appreciate that note as well. And we've heard that feedback from a couple of other members who also weren't able to join us today for that very reason. So I appreciate you calling that out. And I know clerks are listening and taking note as well. Just looking to see, Malid, I see your hand. Go on, jump on in.
I saw Dr. Kathy also put her hand up, so I hope we'll hear more from Kathy. But it's the point that was just raised by previous speaker, that up to 6 might not necessarily mean 6. It could be 5, it could be 4, right? It could be 3. And that was sort of the conversation we had with the clerk. So I just want advice from the chair. I really value your amazing facilitation of this meeting, and I know we're going to work very cohesively, but do you think stronger language, let's say 6 meetings would be better, or is up to 6 you think sufficient for us to try out and then see how that goes?
Thanks, Waleed. I appreciate the shout out for my chairing skills. I'm still learning. I hope to continue to improve along the way. I'm sorry. I was just looking in my many notes in front of me, and I don't have the actual piece here. Gina, could you please call up and display the letter once more, just because I want to clarify if it does say up to 6 or if expand to 6. And that would maybe be an amendment we could make together here today. If there's agreement that 6 is welcome and 6 is a better number for us, gives us a bit more, again, latitude to do this work through the course. Can hold up to 4 meetings per year. Recommend that committee meet up to 6 times per year. Looking for guidance from the clerks, appreciating that there may be something within the terms of reference, but wondering if we can, in fact, go ahead and just amend the language to be a little bit more clear and strong to say expand to 6. And I know scheduling is a nightmare and there's lots of different pieces that run in, but Gina, I wonder if that's an amendment we could make before voting on this item. Sorry, Gina. I don't know if we've got you. Yeah.
My apologies. I was muted.
That's okay.
It could be amended so that instead of saying, like, is it the intent to require that there be 6 meetings per year?
Yeah. I
So
think we'd
yes, there could be. Okay, so yes, we could draft that amendment.
Perfect. I think that's what I'm hearing, that we would prefer to go that route to increase the likelihood of landing on those additional 2 meetings over the year. So if you could make that amendment, I would be grateful. And I'm very happy to move to a vote once that amendment is done, unless there are others. Oh, sorry, Kathy, I think you also wanted to jump in. So please, are you good?
Yeah, I will defer because by this amendment that we're talking about right now, it addresses what I wanted to have clarified. So
Perfect. Wonderful. That's great. And again, I think it also hopefully will help to address comments from Dr. Beverly Jean Daniel around the amount of time that we all need to be taking out for this thing. The more meetings we have, hopefully, the more we can have focused conversations and lighter agendas, so we can get through the material together in a better way. Which really is the intention of the item before us. So I appreciate the support from colleagues here at the table, and my thanks again to you, Gina, for that amendment. Do we need to redisplay it, or can we move ahead to a vote? Don't forget to unmute for us, Gina, so we can hear you.
Yes, sorry, just give us a moment.
Yep, no
Prepare the
problem.
motion for you.
No problem. Happy to provide some time. And similar to Queen's comments, I wasn't sure how long we would be today. I knew we had a light agenda, but really, really grateful for everyone's presence and contributions. Again, thank you all for your flexibility with the timing and the virtual nature of our meeting here today. The next one, I'm sure we won't get snowed out and we'll be able to spend time together in June when the sun is back and the days are longer. And at least I'll be in better spirits outside of this winter season. So looking forward to that opportunity. Do I have someone willing to move adoption of the recommendations within the letter that Gina's just amending for us?
Okay,
Dr.
so
Beverly?
we'll just display the motion.
Perfect. We'll have it moved by Dr. Beverly Jean Daniel, and don't think we need a seconder. Learning. Perfect. Go. They just we've got the there we go. Thank you so much, Gina. So Dr. Beverly Jean Daniel, thank you so much for your support moving this. That City Council amend the terms of reference to require the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee to hold 6 meetings per year at the call of the chair or vice chair on delegation of the chair. So that motion is before us. Looking for a show of hands, all in favor. Wonderful. Thank you all. Any opposed? Seeing none, that item carries. I'll also move to excuse the absence. So just a last quick order of business. And Karis mentioned, and I think it's important for us to recognize our colleagues out doing important work in this very important month that we are all grateful to celebrate, making sure that our stories, our conversations, and holding space together is happening in a good way. I'm thinking of Rosemary Sadler today, who's not with us due to other conflicts. And so with them in mind and in heart, we'd like to just move a motion to excuse the absence of members who are not present for today's meeting. And look all in favor to excuse the absence of our colleagues not here today. Show of hands, thank you so very much. The clerks will record that. That carries. And that concludes our business for today. That was so quick. Thank you, members, staff, and presenters, our colleagues at City Hall. The meeting is now adjourned. Wishing you all a wonderful remainder of Black History Month and look forward to getting together again soon for more discussion on our important work together. Thank you all so much. Take good care, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.